It is the evening of March the 3rd, 2022. The defendant, Kouri Richins, her husband, Eric Richins, and their 3 children, 9-year-old Carter, 7-year-old Ashton, and 5-year-old Weston, are at their home in Camas. Eric Richins lived for his 3 boys. At 7:22 p.m., Kouri Richins' boyfriend, Robert Josh Grossman, texts Kouri Richins an image of 2 people romantically kissing. The image is captioned, "Love you." At 8:36, Kouri Richins replies, "Love you." The boys go to bed. Kouri Richins makes Eric a drink and takes it to him in their bedroom. He drinks on the bed. She departs the bedroom. Kouri Richins returns to the bedroom at about 3:00 a.m. She feels that Eric is cold. She nudges him. He does not respond. She sees that he is stiff and pale. His mouth is wide open. At 3:06 a.m., Kouri Richins unlocks her cell phone. She travels 243 feet beginning at 3:08 a.m. She unlocks her cell phone again at 3:10, 3:15, and twice at 3:19. At 3:21, Kouri Richins unlocks her cell phone and calls 911. Paramedics respond, but they are unable to revive Eric. He has no pulse. He is cold. They pronounce him dead at 3:58 a.m. on March the 4th, but they think he has been dead a while. My name again is Brad Bloodworth. I am one of Summit County's criminal prosecutors who, along with Lindsay Shervinack and Fred Burmester, will present to you the state of Utah's aggravated murder case against Kouri Darden Richins for causing the poisoning death of her husband and the father of her 3 children, Eric Richins. The state will also prove to you that 2 weeks before murdering Eric Richins, Kouri Richins attempted to murder him. And 2 weeks before that, by fraud and forgery, she took out an insurance policy on his life.
Objection, can we approach?
Weeks before attempting to murder Eric Richins, Kouri Richins took out an insurance policy by fraud and forgery on Eric's life. And 2 weeks after Eric died, she submitted a fraudulent claim on yet another insurance policy. In this opening statement, I will summarize for you some of the evidence that the state will present over the next few days, perhaps weeks, so that you have a framework to assemble and analyze all of the evidence. The evidence will prove that Kouri Richins murdered Eric for his money and to get a fresh start at life. More than anything, She wanted his money to perpetuate her facade of privilege, affluence, and success. Kouri Richins owned a house flipping business. She would purchase, rehab, and resell homes. She presented herself to friends and business associates as remarkably successful. The evidence will prove that on the day that Eric died, Kouri Richins owed over $4.5 million to over 20 different lenders. And she did not have the ability to service that debt because her bank accounts were exhausted and her credit was exhausted. She had been taking out new loans to include payday loans to service existing loans, but her new credit was drying up. In the 5 months leading to Eric Richins' death, Kouri Richins overdrafted over 200 transactions, totaling over $300,000. And on the day that Eric died, Kouri Richins was scheduled to close on an unfinished and derelict mansion in Midway, and thus take on an additional $3.2 million in debt. She did not have the financial ability to service that debt, to rehab the mansion, or to hold on to it long enough to resell it. The mansion may appear impressive from a distance, but upon close inspection, it is just a facade. On the other hand, on the day that Eric died, his estate was worth over $4 million. And the evidence will prove that Kouri Richins believed she would inherit it all. She believed that she would inherit Eric's $2 million interest in a stonemasonry business, an interest that a prenuptial agreement prevented her from getting any part of if they divorced, but permitted her to get all of if Eric died while they were married. She believed that she would inherit the $1 million or so dollar home that they lived in, but that Eric owned separate and apart from her. And she believed that she would benefit from nearly $2 million in insurance on Eric's life, to include the $100,000 policy that she took out a few weeks before he died. Now, for Kouri Richins' fresh start at life motive. This motive overlaps with her money motive. She needed Eric Richins' money to get her fresh start at life. The evidence will prove that Kouri Richins was chronically unhappy in her marriage. She thought that having children would make her happier, but it did not. She consulted with a divorce attorney in the months leading up to Eric's death. 3 months before Eric's death, Kouri Richins booked a $4,000, 5-night, all-inclusive vacation for her and her boyfriend, Robert Josh Grossman, at the Secrets St. Martin's Resort and Spa in the Caribbean. They were to check in the month after Eric died. Three weeks before Eric's death, 15 days before Eric's death, one day before the charge, attempted murder, Kouri Richins text messaged Josh Grossman, "If I was divorced right now and asked you to marry me tomorrow, you would? I just want to lay on the couch and cuddle you. Watch a murder documentary and snuggle." Five days after the charged attempted murder and 11 days before the charged murder, Kouri Richins text messaged Josh Grossman, "Babe, I miss you. I want you today, every day. Not just sexually, but physically, mentally, every day when I wake up. I do want a future together. I do want you. Figure life out together. If he could just go away. And you could just be here. Life would be so perfect. I love you. I don't know what my deal is today. I'm sorry." 9 days after the charged attempted murder, 1 week before the charged murder, Kouri Richins text messaged her boyfriend, "I have a crazy dream. You quit your job. I divorce and come up with millions and millions. We buy Midway and live in the guest house and rent out the huge house as a big event center. $15,000 a day like they charge down the road, maybe $12,000 to stay competitive. And we will just run the event center as our daily job and hang out every day, raise some kids, have a little farm. Deal?" Just over 2 weeks after Eric Richins' death, Kouri Richins text messaged her boyfriend a link to the secret St. Martin's Resort and Spa in the Caribbean and asked, "Are we there yet?" One month and 5 days after Eric Richins' death, Kouri Richins texted, "I think I want you to be my husband one day." Now for the attempted murder charge. Carmen Lauber was a house cleaner who worked for Kouri Richins' aunt's house cleaning company. She cleaned Kouri Richins' house. She knew Kouri Richins for nearly 9 years. Kouri Richins knew that Carmen Lauber had a criminal history involving drugs. The evidence will prove that on February the 11th, 2022, 3 days before the charged attempted murder, Carmen Lauber, at Kouri Richins' request, purchased illicit pills from a street drug dealer who was a friend of a friend. And she gave those pills to Kouri Richins. That street dealer's name is Robert Crozier, and he sold Carmen Lauber the pills at a draper in Maverick. 3 days later, on Valentine's Day, Kouri Richins purchased a sandwich from the Mirror Lake Diner and left it for Eric Richins. She then departed Camas and met up with Josh Grossman an hour away. At 11:33 that morning, Eric texted Kouri Richins, "I'm going to lay down for a bit. If I don't start getting better, I'm going to head to the hospital soon." Shortly thereafter, all activity on Eric's cell phone ceased. for nearly 90 minutes in the middle of a busy workday. Once activity resumed, Eric Richins called his two best friends. They sounded to him scared, somber, confused, bewildered. A few days after that, Kouri Richins asked Carmen Lauber if she could get something stronger. The evidence will prove that on February the 26th, 5 or 6 days before Eric's death, Carmen Lauber, again at Kouri Richins' request, purchased pills from the same street dealer at the same Maverick in Draper. And she left those pills at a home that Kouri Richins was just finishing up a rehab on. The evidence will prove that those illicit pills contained fentanyl. The autopsy and toxicology report shows that Eric Richins died of fentanyl poisoning. He had several times a lethal amount of fentanyl in his blood and more in his stomach. And that extraordinary amount of fentanyl was intentional, not accidental. The evidence will prove that time and again, Kouri Richins tried to cover up her attempted murder and ultimate murder of Eric Richins. When confronted with Eric's reaction on Valentine's Day, Kouri Richins text messaged her friend. It was Valentine's Day, and Eric and I were both working from home that day, and I ordered lunch from Mirror Lake. He never broke out in hives or used an EpiPen. I was fucking with him. Bailey was there too. He said the sandwich hurt his stomach, so he was going to nap. No hives, no EpiPen. Kouri Richins was an hour away from Eric Richins with her boyfriend. Regarding the morning of Eric Richins' death, Kouri Richins wrote in a notebook that she entered their room at 3:20 a.m. She saw that when she nudged Eric, nothing happened. She grabbed her phone and called 911. She first grabbed her phone at least 3:06 a.m. and delayed calling 911 at least 15 minutes. The evidence will also prove that Kouri Richins had a guilty conscience. The morning that Eric died, his family came over. Kouri Richins could not face her children or Eric's dad, Eric Richins. She didn't speak to him. A few days after Eric's death, Kouri Richins and her boyfriend, Josh, they drove into the Uintas and talked about Eric's death for the first time. Kouri Richins asked Josh, while serving in Iraq, did you ever kill anyone? When he responded, she asked, how did that make you feel? along the lines of both cover-up and guilty conscience, Kouri Richins' text messages and other data from Kouri Richins' phone for the 2 months leading up to Eric Richins' death and a week or two after have all been deleted. Police seized that phone. She got a new phone. And on that new phone, there were the following internet searches. Can cops uncover deleted messages iPhone? Can you delete everything off an old iPhone without actually having it? Can deleted text messages be retrieved from an iPhone? How to completely wipe an iPhone clear remotely. How to permanently delete information from an iPhone remotely. On April the 13th, 2022, about 5 weeks after Eric Richins' death, detectives informed Kouri Richins that the autopsy and toxicology results show that Eric died of fentanyl poisoning. Thereafter, searches on her phone include if someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? Can cops force you to do a lie detector test? Women, Utah prison, luxury prisons for the rich in America. Almost a year after Eric Richins' death, when Kouri Richins knew the police were investigating her for his death, Kouri Richins published a children's book on how to deal with the loss of a parent. And she promoted that children's book on local television and local radio. The state will present to you this evidence and more through a series of fact witnesses, expert witnesses, documents, and Kouri Richins' own words. As you evaluate the evidence and you consider it and you weigh it, let me offer 4 recommendations. The first is the evidence will prove that Kouri Richins murdered Eric Richins, but also consider the evidence that proves that Eric Richins did not kill himself or die accidentally. The evidence will prove that Kouri Richins had the means, motive, and opportunity to murder Eric Richins. But please consider the evidence that proves no one else did. Consider the evidence leading up to Eric Richins' death that proves that Kouri Richins murdered him, but also consider the evidence after Eric's death that also proves it. As you evaluate Kouri Richins' conduct, consider the evidence that proves that she richly values and trades on her perceived appearance, affluence, privilege, and success. Let me please highlight two of the judge's instructions that he just provided. The first is stay focused on the evidence. What the attorneys say, how they say it, their voice inflection, none of that is evidence. Please stay focused on the evidence. Please take notes. As he said, you will probably only hear from a witness one time, and that is when the witness testifies. At the end of the trial, I'll stand back up here. And in closing argument, we will analyze the evidence. We will apply it to the elements that the judge instructed you on. And the state of Utah will ask you to find Kouri Richins guilty of the aggravated murder of Eric Richins, the attempted aggravated murder of Eric Richins, 2 counts of insurance fraud, and forgery. Back for a moment to the morning of March the 4th, 2022. It is 8:30. Medical examiners place Eric's body in a body bag onto a stretcher, and they wheel him out of his home for the last time. His boys are upstairs with their uncle. Kouri Richins has not yet told them that Eric is dead, and she won't for a few more hours. The last of the sheriff's deputies leave, crime scene techs, medical examiners. And on Kouri Richins' phone, the following 3 images are accessed.
Is your mic on, Ms. Nestor?
Yes.
Can you tap it for me?
We need Katie to be connected.
She is.
Okay.
It's a black screen at the moment. Is that intentional? Katie, you ready to go? My apologies. One moment. My error.
What's the address of the emergency? My husband's not breathing. He's cold. Okay, what's the address? 282 Willow Court. 282 Willow Court? Uh-huh. Okay, what's a good phone number in case we get disconnected? 435 671 4987. Okay, it's going to be in Francis. Okay, tell me exactly what happened. I don't know. I just came in. I was sleeping with my kids. Okay, I can't understand you. I need you to take a deep breath. What's going on? I don't know. I was sleeping in with my kids. I just came in our bed, and I turned over, and he's just cold. He's just cold. Who's cold? My husband. I turned the light on. And he's not breathing? No. He's not breathing? No. I need you to confirm it for me. Is he not breathing? No. Okay, can you do CPR? No. I don't know how. You don't know? I'm going to tell you how to. Are you willing to do CPR? Yeah. Okay.
Those were the sounds of a wife becoming a widow. 6.5 hours before that terrible phone call, Eric and Kouri Richins were in that same bedroom, and they were celebrating. They were celebrating because Kouri was about to close on the biggest real estate deal that her company had ever done. She was about to close on something called the Midway Mansion. Slide 2, please. A sprawling, multi-million-dollar home in Midway that had been abandoned before construction was completed. And the plan was to fix it up just enough to resell it. In other words, repair the windows, make it look nice. There had been vandalism inside, clean it all out, get it ready to flip and sell. And the concept is to sell it for millions more than the bargain basement price they got, because it was just a dilapidated, falling apart, abandoned property. And the plan was to flip it for so much that she was going to make millions of dollars of profit, at least $2 million for her and for all of her investors. And Eric was a part of this. Eric had been out at the property that very day, the day that he died, spreading gravel to make it look nice for open houses, and so that it'd be ready as soon as they closed. These two had other things to celebrate on March 3rd, besides this big deal that was going to make them a lot of money. One of the things they had to celebrate was that Eric's business was doing great. Can we have slide 3? Eric worked as a stonemason, and you're going to see, this is 2020. This isn't even the year before he died. So his income kept going up and up. But he declared to the IRS that he made over $750,000 that year. That was just in 1 year of what Eric was bringing in to their marriage and their family. They also lived in a beautiful home. Slide 4. It was a beautiful home. They got married in that home. That home was half Kouri's. That's how it works in marriage. You get half of a home as soon as you live in it. They also had a 2-story garage that you can kind of see in that picture a little bit back from the house. And it was filled, slide 5. It was filled with exotic animals. Eric was a huge hunter. He went on trips all over the world. They had the kind of money that they were blessed with. He could travel to Africa and travel to Mexico, which he did 2 weeks before he died. He was in Mexico hunting an exotic sheep, actually. They had four-wheelers. They had lots of vehicles. They had snowmobiles and ATVs and ski equipment. They were very blessed. They had a lot to celebrate. They also had a wonderful family. Slide 6. The one thing that I don't think anybody in this courtroom is ever going to challenge, us included, is that Eric and Kouri adored their boys. They were their world. They were in that place that those of us who've had kids have all been in, where you spend your days driving them around to soccer and all their activities, and they're just the center of your world. And that's how both of these parents felt about their kids. They loved them a lot. And what's more important is that the boys adored their father, adored him. And Kouri knew that about her sons and about her family. Their marriage had survived through some rough times, and you're going to hear about that. Like any marriage, it wasn't a perfect marriage. They'd gone through a really bad year where they both contemplated divorce, and they did what a lot of couples do. They went to marriage counseling, they worked it out, and they decided to stick it out, and they did. You're going to hear testimony from one of Eric's closest friends that in the few weeks before Eric died, he and Kouri were the happiest together that he'd ever seen them. And you're going to hear that from one of Eric's closest friends. Now, on March 3rd, Eric started sending excited texts before their celebration to Kouri, saying, hey, let's get together. Let's have some celebratory shots. Slide 7, please. Oh, I'm sorry. You guys aren't going to be able to read that. It's really small. But it basically says, thank you. You want to grab lunch today with a celebratory shot? That was Kouri saying she can't, that she has other plans. But he's excited. He wants to celebrate about the big closing. When Eric got home the evening of March 3rd, after he'd been out at the property spreading the gravel, he got home and they all had dinner together as a family. Kouri's mom dropped by. They visited with her mom. Her mom had actually been out at the property the same day with a carpenter trying to get some bids and get it ready to start getting it fixed up. Kouri's mom left. They tucked their boys into bed. And around 9 o'clock, they decided to have their celebratory shot. A friend had given them a gift of some of those, I'm sure you guys have seen them, those copper Moscow Mule cups that you make like in breweries and in bars. And they decided to try out their new cups. So Kouri made what's called a Moscow Mule. And they also had a little shot, which is Eric's idea, of a little lemon drop. They had their drinks. They actually didn't finish them and set the cups in the sink at the house, right there. Around 9:30, they were getting ready to go to bed, and they heard one of the children who suffered from something called night terrors, where they scream out, they have nightmares. One of the children was crying out. So Kouri went to sleep with her son around 9:30 that night. You're going to hear the police. Kouri also told the police the day that they came to the house that she believed Eric might have had what we call a marijuana gummy. You're going to hear Eric loved marijuana gummies. He used them a lot. And the police found a whole bunch of them in the house, in his things, in his clothes, in his closet. You know, he was a marijuana gummy user. Slide 8. These are all gummies that the police found in Eric's things. Some of them, you can tell, had commercial bags where he bought them from dispensaries. Some were in clear bags that he bought from somewhere else, the location unknown. So you take it down. So as they're getting ready to go to bed, you're going to hear that after Kouri left the room, Eric was on his phone. And he was talking to a friend named Scott Wagner. And you're going to hear that Scott Wagner talked to him at 10 o'clock that night. That when Scott Wagner talked to him, he did not sound drunk. He did not sound high. He did not sound like he was on fentanyl or anything else. That there was no sound of the wife or children in the background. That he was alert, that he was having a totally normal conversation with Scott, and this was at 10 p.m. Shortly after 10 p.m., you're going to hear, forgot to mention, when Kouri left the bedroom, she has always maintained from beginning to end that she left her phone in the room, in the charger next to her bed, which we all do at night. When we're about to go to bed, we charge our phones. Nothing unusual there. After 10 o'clock, around 10:30, so this is an hour after Kouri's left the bedroom and is in with her son, Kouri's phone is unlocked and moves just a few feet. Now you're going to hear Kouri's friends in this trial and some other people testify that Eric was always checking Kouri's phone. And you can kind of see why he probably was doing that. Based on what you've already heard from the state. Maybe he had good reasons, but he checked her phone a lot. So we know he did that at about 10:30 because we have proof that the phone opened and closed. Moved a short distance, like maybe walking around the bedroom, and then closed again. And that is the last thing we know for sure that Eric did the night that he died. Sometime after that, we don't know exactly when Eric died. Slide 9. When Eric died, his Apple Watch was hanging on a charger, nice and neat. His phone was in a charger on the nightstand. He was lying in his underwear, like when you go to bed. He was on his back on his side of the bed. So it appears pretty clear that Eric went to bed and fell asleep and died in his sleep. You're also going to hear, slide 10, that there was an empty pill bottle right next to him in his nightstand. And I want you to pay careful attention to this. The empty pill bottle expired in 2016. Made out to him for pain pills. That's going to become important later. Sometime after 3 a.m., Kouri wakes up and comes back into a dark bedroom. You're going to hear she unlocked her phone. Probably, we're not going to dispute the times that the state just mentioned. The phone gets unlocked shortly after 3 a.m., which is what time Kouri says from day one that she got up. She always tells the police, I got up at 3. The phone verifies that. The phone moved around the house a little bit. You're going to hear the distances in the house. There's going to be investigators that are going to tell you how many feet from the master bedroom to the bathroom to the kitchen. They're going to tell you about how many feet are in that house if you're walking around the house. It appears clear she walked around the house just a little bit for a few minutes. And then the phone stops being active, which is indicative of being back in the charger, indicative of not moving anymore. And a few minutes later, you hear the 911 call that you guys just heard. So that gives her enough time to crawl into the bed, touch her husband, and realize he's cold. Just about 3 minutes. That's all it took. And she picks her phone up, calls 911. You're going to see that the phone records prove all of this. At that time, I believe everyone's going to agree, and I think the state even admitted it in their opening, it's pretty clear he'd been dead for several hours. And you're going to actually see a photo when we pass, our blood pools in the position that we lay in. It's not circulating anymore because our heart's not working. And you're going to see a picture of his back. And you're going to see that the blood he had been dead long enough for the blood to pool on his back because he was laying on his back. So that usually indicates he'd been dead for several hours, and the medical examiner is going to tell you that. So those 6 hours, ladies and gentlemen, between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m., somewhere in that time, Eric Richins died. Somewhere in that time, he ingested a fatal dose of fentanyl. What you will never hear after 4 years of investigation, where as recently as 2 weeks ago, they were back searching that house. After 4 years of investigation and 5 weeks of this trial, you know what you're never going to hear? Is how that fentanyl got inside of him. Because there is zero evidence of that. To this day, slide 11, please, you're going to see that his death certificate, oh, that's the wrong thing, Katie. Just take it down. Sorry about that. That's the wrong thing. His death certificate reads that the manner of his death is still unknown to this day. You're going to hear testimony that a medical examiner has the ability to declare the manner of someone's death. It can be homicide, it can be suicide, it can be accidental overdose, it can be murder, it can be anything. To this day, the medical examiner, the professional that's the head of declaring how people die in the state of Utah, has never been able to determine the manner of Eric Richins' death. Now, you're going to hear first responders and law enforcement tell you that no fentanyl was found in the bedroom the night of his death. But you're also going to hear them that they didn't search for it. You know, we've all seen the TV shows, the crime shows. What do you do if there's a murder, right? If you think there's a murder, tape it off. No one gets in or out. It becomes a crime scene. You search everything. You search the closet. You search the bathroom. You search the vehicles. You search the house. You search the office. They didn't do that. All kinds of friends and family, and you're going to see video of all the people that were in the house that day. There was no restrictions on anybody. And guess what was sitting in the sink? The cups. They were sitting there. They were never taken. They were never tested. Nothing. The nanny ended up putting them in the dishwasher the next morning, and they still had fluid in them. You're going to hear the day after Eric died. Not day after, day of. They started interviewing Kouri over and over and over again about what happened that night. You're going to hear for yourselves that her explanation of what happened that night has never changed from that call you just listened to. As far as the timing, as far as what happened, never. Law enforcement secretly recorded her phone conversations for over a year after this incident. 2 years later, listening in to her conversations with her family to see if her story about what happened that night ever altered, ever changed. You're going to hear it never changed. You're going to hear that before Eric's body was even taken out of their bedroom, Kouri was told the body was going to a morgue for an autopsy. So within an hour of the cops getting there, she knew there was going to be an autopsy of his body. And what happens when you have an autopsy? You figure out how someone died. That's what doctors do. They test your blood. They test your bodily tissues. So she knew that. But did she tell the police or the medical responders or the EMS, hey guys, you might want to check for fentanyl? My husband used it all the time. Did she do that? Because with one sentence, she could have taken all suspicion off her and made this about a drug overdose. But she didn't. As a matter of fact, she could have staged a whole drug overdose scene with fentanyl pills on his stomach and everything all over the place and say, gosh, I tried to get him in rehab for years and I couldn't. But she didn't. And you know why? Because she told her truth. She told her truth over and over again, and it's exactly what she told that 911 operator that you just heard and you're going to hear over and over in trial. I don't know what happened. Now you're going to hear that Eric Richins' family simply could not accept that. They needed someone or something to blame for losing someone they loved that wasn't Eric himself. And that's totally understandable. No family ever wants to believe that behind closed doors, someone they love is using drugs. No one wants to believe that. But the family's need to make sense of Eric's death went way beyond what you would expect a normal grieving family to go through. You will hear that as the detective arrived at the house, Eric's sisters spoke with the detective in the driveway. This is before anyone in the house knows how Eric died. If he had a heart attack, if he had an aneurysm, a lot of people were talking about aneurysms at the scene, and you're going to hear that. Nobody knew yet how he died. The sisters were telling the police, Kouri probably did this. Kouri probably did this. Day one. His sister Katie tells the police, and you're going to hear her testify about this, that Kouri had recently found out that Eric had put all their assets in a trust, and that Katie was in charge of the trust. She's going to say, I'm in charge, and that Kouri didn't like that. She told that to the police at the scene. So Kouri already knew before Eric ever died that his assets were protected in a trust and didn't automatically come to her if he died, that there were legal things you had to go through. You're going to hear that it didn't stop there. The Richins family hired a private investigator, and you're going to see how much they paid that private investigator, and it's almost $100,000. And they paid that investigator to spend every waking minute digging up as much dirt as he possibly could on Kouri Richins to try to implicate her in Eric's death. Even though the state already had all the evidence from the scene that night that would show what happened in those 6 hours, right? The investigator goes looking for skeletons in the closet. And boy, did he find some. You're going to hear that after an exhaustive private investigation into every single thing about Kouri Richins' life, he uncovered plenty of things that I'm quite sure she's not proud of. She's not a perfect person. She's a flawed person. I would submit we all are. But the prosecutor just turned some of her most intimate, personal correspondence into entertainment with bubbles and slides. And they're going to continue to assassinate her character throughout this trial, so get ready. The judge has instructed you not to prejudge this case and to wait until you hear all of the evidence before you make up your mind. So let me assure you, no marriage is what it appears on the surface. What happens when we close our bedroom door is very private and is not always known by family or friends. And I think you're going to learn a lot about Kouri and Eric's relationship in this trial, and I would ask you to wait before you go rush to judgment like they have about her sexual morality, her personal decisions, about her marriage, and about her family. The prosecution is going to spend days and weeks telling you all about arguments Kouri's had with her husband in years past. Problems in their marriage, yeah, they had them. Disagreements, infidelities, ups and downs in their marriage, all true. They're also going to tell you all about Kouri's business. They tore it apart. They examined every bank account, every real estate deal she ever did, her taxes, when she made money, when she lost money, if she paid her taxes on time, if she bounced checks, if she borrowed too much, if she didn't borrow enough, if she borrowed wisely, if she was too risky in her business. You're going to hear all of that. None of that has anything to do with those 6 hours, but you're going to sit through it and you're going to listen to all of it. And you're going to hear testimony about her most intimate personal and business affairs going back years before Eric died. The family and the private investigator even became convinced that Kouri had tried to kill Eric before, on Valentine's Day, when he had an allergic reaction to a sandwich, drank some Benadryl, may or may not have taken an EpiPen shot, took a 2-hour nap, and then drove his kids to soccer. That's the evidence you're going to hear about Valentine's Day. You're going to hear that he had discussed with Kouri that he was going to drive the kids to soccer. So they're asking you to believe that she secretly put narcotics in her husband's food right before he's going to drive the 3 things that matter the most to her in the world to soccer. You're going to hear that that this incident wasn't even a blip to Eric. He had a professional allergy doctor that he saw very shortly after this incident. He never even brought this up. He never even talked about it with his doctor. You're going to hear that he laughed about it with one of Kouri's friends who visited shortly after. He thought it was funny. Interestingly, you're also going to hear that people who use oxycodone or hydrocodone, like that bottle said, also tend to have allergic reactions. They can have very similar symptoms if you use pain pills to the symptoms described of what Eric experienced on Valentine's Day. Here's what you're not going to see in this trial. You're not going to see one single bit of evidence showing what was in that sandwich, if he went to a doctor, if he did any tests run, because he didn't. No evidence at all. Now, the family's investigator regularly updated law enforcement on his investigation. He sent them everything he found. He sent them witnesses to interview. He sent them interviews he did of the witnesses first. You're going to hear this very same private investigator took Eric's computer before the police got it and had it for a long time in his possession, looking through all of Eric's computer. You're also going to hear Eric's family went and hired experts. They hired experts in toxicology, in finances, in handwriting analysis, paid them all a bunch of money. And now those same people that the family hired are going to appear here as witnesses for the state to testify against Kouri. You're going to hear that the family had constant communications with the prosecution team right up until they decided to charge Kouri a year later. Now, as you've already heard from this prosecutor, they're going to spend weeks in this trial trying to convince you that Kouri had reasons to kill her husband, because they can't show you that she did kill her husband. You're not going to hear a single one of Eric's family, Kouri's investors, Kouri's friends, her lover, her accountant, her broker, her lawyer, her marriage counselor, her accountants, her husband's friends, her husband's co-workers. Not one of those people is ever going to be able to tell you what happened in those 6 hours. Not one of them. You're going to hear me ask each one of them in this trial, do you know whether or not Eric Richins knowingly ingested fentanyl? Do you know whether he accidentally ingested fentanyl thinking he was taking another kind of pill and it had fentanyl in it, and he took it and accidentally ingested it? Do you know whether he mixed fentanyl with alcohol after Kouri went to sleep? The answer every single time from every single one of these witnesses is going to be no. Now here's what you will hear. You will hear that Eric suffered from pain a lot. That he suffered from knee and back pain related to his work. He did hard work. He was a stonemason, lifting heavy stones. And he also was a huge outdoorsman. He was hiking, snowmobiling, skiing, hunting, and he had pain in his back and his knees from that kind of activity. He also had been diagnosed with Lyme disease. He believed he had it, and he claimed to people that were very close to him that he suffered with intense bouts of pain that he believed was related to Lyme disease. But this is a man's man, this guy. He's a hunter. He's a macho guy, right? He didn't want to show weakness. He didn't want people to know he was suffering. He didn't share that with a lot of people. You're going to hear that Eric was so dependent on the drugs like the gummies that gave him relief from his pain that he would even take it and smuggle it in his luggage when he went on trips out of the country and out of the continental United States when you got to go through TSA. That's how much he needed that relief. Now you're going to hear on one of the calls that they were recording when Kouri was talking to her family, she tells her family that she purchased pain pills for Eric at his request. She purchased them from a woman named Carmen that she knew who cleaned her properties for her. And she knew Carmen had access to people that had drugs. You will hear that she asked Carmen to get oxycodone. Oxycodone, which is very similar to the hydrocodone that you saw in that pill bottle right there.
Your Honors, apologize. May we approach?
happen a lot over the next 5 weeks, so get ready. You're going to hear that oxycodone is a fairly low-dose pain pill that you can get prescriptions for. Most prescriptions for oxycodone are around the range of about 10 milligrams per pill. That's about, if your doctor gives you oxycodone, that's about what you usually get it for. If you want stronger oxycodone, like up to 30 milligrams, you generally either have to have a special prescription from a doctor or you're going to hear that you can get it on the street, right? And the state has talked about this gentleman, Robert Crozier. Robert Crozier sold higher strength oxys, up to 30 milligrams. He's going to testify that back in 2022, before Eric died, that's all he sold was oxy. That he didn't sell fentanyl at that time. It hadn't really got into the country yet, like it is now, right, where it's everywhere. It hadn't really happened yet. He was just selling oxys, and he sold the stronger dose. So you're going to hear and you're going to see evidence that Kouri asked Carmen for something stronger, and that Carmen, you're going to hear from Mr. Crozier, purchased 30 milligram oxys from Crozier. Crozier's going to say that is what he sold Carmen Lauber, was 30 milligram oxy pills. You're also going to hear that in Eric's autopsy, there's no oxy in his system. So the pills that were purchased by Carmen Lauber could not have been the cause of Eric's death. The fentanyl had to come from somewhere else. You're going to hear Carmen testify now that Kouri asked her for fentanyl. But what you're going to hear is that that was not Carmen's original story. That when Carmen was originally interviewed, she said no mention of fentanyl. It was all about oxy. There was no fentanyl. Carmen talks like she doesn't even know what fentanyl is, right? Guess when she changes her testimony? She changes her testimony when the police say, hey, you know what? We caught you. We caught you with drugs. We caught you with guns. And if you don't say what we want you to say, you're going to jail for a really, really long time, federal and state. But we're going to give you a ticket. We're going to give you a free ticket to get out of all the trouble you're in. But you got to say Kouri said fentanyl. And she changes her story. You're going to get to evaluate her credibility and what you think of her. You're going to hear that just a few weeks before Eric died, guess where he was? Mexico. Guess where the fentanyl comes into this country from? Mexico. Now, after you've listened to all the evidence in this case, after you've looked at all the exhibits, you're going to be asked to determine what happened in that 6 hours. Not the 3 years before, not the 2 years before, not the 1 year before. In those 6 hours, you're going to have to decide if Kouri Richins intentionally and knowingly poisoned secretly her husband, ending the life of the father of her kids, knowing that she was going to cause those little boys to feel pain every day for the rest of their life for the loss of their father. And that she did it for money. And that she did it for money that was less than what she was about to make on one of her own deals. For way less than what Eric Richins would have earned over the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Way less than you knew she was guaranteed to get because she knew about the existence of the trust. She knew there's no guarantee on the assets or the home, right? Finally, you're going to be asked to determine whether or not the sandwich incident was an attempt to commit a murder. That's going to be an easy one for you. You're going to be asked to whether she lied to the life insurance companies, and I presume the state's going to argue that the lie was that she didn't cause his death. Because if you cause someone's death, you can't get the life insurance. So I guess that's what they're saying the fraud is. And then there's a little flyer that she got in the mail, that we've all gotten in the mail, that if you're a credit union member, about once or twice a year, you get this little thing in the mail that says, hey, we'll give you $100,000 for your life insurance. Just sign here because we are so glad you're our credit union member. And so she signed that. a little while before Eric died for $100,000. $100,000. That's, Eric Richins made that in 2 months, right? 3 months. And they're saying she forged his name on that little flyer when she mailed it in. In order to prove that, they have to prove that Eric didn't allow her to do it. Now, I'm telling you right now, wives everywhere sign their husbands' names on a lot of things. You've got to find that she did it without his knowledge, and I don't know how they're going to prove that. Now, there is one piece of good news as you evaluate this evidence and the facts in this case. There is some good news for you. There are going to be a lot of facts that we actually agree on that we're not even going to challenge. We'll just be like, yeah, that happened. Hopefully that's going to help the case move a little faster for you guys. But interestingly, even though we're not going to dispute the facts, we sure are going to dispute what the facts mean. Sometimes you can look at the same facts and see two very different results. Let me show you what I mean. Katie, can you put up slide 12?
Is it up on your screen, Katie? 1 second, please.
The judge has to give us the pass to get into the
This
screen.
happens from time to time. Okay. Brittany. Katie, do me a favor. Disconnect from table 1. Plug back in. Okay, 1 moment.
There it is. So look at this picture of a young woman in a fur coat. See it? Now look again. You see a witch? Nose, mouth. There's going to be times in this case where the state is going to discuss facts with certain witnesses, and they're going to show you the witch. And I'm going to take those same facts and those same witnesses, and I'm going to show you a widow. At the end of the trial, if you can still see both faces, that's reasonable doubt. The judge has instructed you that the burden of proof in this case lies with this table. Katie, can you put up slide 13? Can you make it a little bigger, please? The law presumes the defendant is not guilty of the crime charge. She's innocent right now, and you have to accept that to do your job. The presumption persists unless the prosecution's evidence convinces you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. Katie, can you put up slide 14? This burden, this is a heavy burden for the state. We know that. And our Constitution gives them that burden. Our Constitution, that same Constitution, promises Kouri Richins a fair trial by a jury of her peers, and that's you, her fellow citizens, who took an oath to swear that you will stand between Kouri and the government and make them meet their duty before they can get through you. And they've got to meet it by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. More powerful than just more likely or not that she did it. It has to be firmly convincing you. There are very few things we know with absolute certainty. The criminal case doesn't require proof that overcomes every possible doubt. But if you think there is a real possibility that she is not guilty, you must give her the benefit of the doubt and find her not guilty. And that's the burden that's on your table. When you go back into that jury room, that's going to be on y'all's table. We're asking you to be courageous, to pay attention, to stand strong, and to hold the government to that burden that's on their table. Hold them to it. And at the end of this case, you will see Kouri Richins is innocent. She is counting on you to do your job. And the only proper verdict to return in this case, which we are going to ask you to return at the end of this case, is to find her not guilty on all charges.